The stranger in hallway 23. The elevator doors clanged shut behind May, leaving her and her son Lucas in the hushed echo of the 23rd floor. Cardboard boxes lined the corridor like tombstones, their labels scrawled in her hurried handwriting. Each one held pieces of a life, repacked and relocated again. Lucas reached up and squeezed May's palm tighter as footsteps resonated from the corner. May looked down, whispered a gentle reassurance, and together they maneuvered past the boxes toward the apartment at the end of the hallway. She could feel the glances before she saw them, a crack of a door, a sudden hush behind a peephole. Their new neighbors watched with the guarded curiosity of small-town sentinels, marking the passage of an unfamiliar face. The building was old but well kept, the kind of place where families stayed for decades. Pictures of birthdays and graduations decorated doors. The linoleum shone under the fluorescent bulbs overhead, but the brightness did nothing to warm the chill May sensed in the air. Just as May wrestled her keys from her purse, a woman emerged from the apartment opposite, blonde, statuesque, wrapped in a pastel robe and holding a mug that probably cost more than May's weekly groceries. She offered a tight-lipped smile. "Oh," she said, as if startled. "You're moving in?" May nodded, returning the smile with the politeness she'd practiced all her life. "Yes, apartment 23B. The woman's smile tightened, eyes flicking over Lucas, his hesitant posture, his skin just a shade different from hers. "Right. Well, I'm Pamela. I head the tenants committee. If you need anything, just ring." The last words carried the faintest hint of warning. "Thank you," May replied, though she doubted she'd ever take Pamela up on the offer. Pamela lingered for a heartbeat, scanning the boxes, her gaze snagging on the stickered luggage from airports far away. Then she retreated, a cloud of French perfume trailing behind. Lucas tugged at May's arm. "Are people here nice, Mom?" May knelt beside him. She wanted to promise him everything would be different this time, that bridges could be built, and strangers could. Hallway beyond their door seemed dormant, until, at 8 o'clock sharp, footsteps echoed with authority against the linoleum floors. When May peeked through the peephole, she caught a glimpse of the self-styled monarch of the building, Pamela. Pamela was always impeccably dressed. Even at this hour, her cream-colored dress pressed and gold watch gleaming. She stopped with her clipboard under one arm, knocking briskly on the neighbor's door. The resident, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, answered sheepishly, offering quick explanations about a bike improperly stored in the hallway. Pamela nodded coolly, jotting notes, dismissing the man with a single, tight smile before moving on. Shortly after, Pamela rapped, lightly, almost musically, on May's door. May steeled herself, smoothed her hair, and opened it. Pamela didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped inside, surveying the modest disarray of unpacked boxes. "I wanted to welcome you officially, May," she said. "We take our community seriously here. Neatness, timeliness, and harmony." May smiled, bowing her head slightly. "Of course, we'll do our best." Pamela's eyes wandered over the apartment, resting a beat too long on the family photo next to May's tea tins, Lucas in her lap, both grinning in the sun of a place far from here. "Some families have trouble fitting in at first," Pamela intoned. "The building is very close-knit." "I understand, Ms. Pamela," May replied, careful to keep her tone friendly. That was easier before she saw the suspicious look flickering in Pamela's eyes. Pamela suddenly crouched, straightening a box that had drifted into the corridor. "Oh, and Mrs. Alvarez downstairs sometimes complains about noise." Thin ceilings, you know. I hope Lucas isn't too— She trailed off with a press of her lips. He's a quiet boy, May replied softly, masking the slight sting of embarrassment. Pamela straightened, tilting her head, almost avian in her precision. Good. Children do better when they keep out of trouble. It sets everyone— Morning sun glinted on the hallway floor, but all May could feel was the frost that seemed to cling to every neighborly smile. Rumors spread. The first hint of trouble was as subtle as a thorn pricking beneath the surface. It started a week after May and Lucas arrived, when the glances in the hallway began to linger just a second too long. The warmth of newness quickly faded. Curiosity, like bread, turned stale and suspicious in the mouths of the residents. May noticed it first in the laundry room. Two women, one May recognized as Mrs. Alvarez from downstairs, paused mid-conversation when she entered, their voices dropping to conspiratorial whispers. They watched her out of the corners of their eyes as May loaded Lucas's tiny shirts into the washer, pretending she didn't notice the tension thickening the air. She heard her name, the one in 23B, followed by the word unfortunate. May tried to ignore it, but the damage was done. Their smiles were gone, replaced by brittle nods and clipped hellos. A damaged potted fern appeared outside Mrs. Alvarez's door one morning. The soil spilled in a mess on the welcome mat. May offered to help clean it, but Mrs. Alvarez raised a hand, face stiff with discomfort. No, it's fine. These things happen, she said, but looked pointedly at May's hands, as if the dirt might have come from her. By the end of that week, the corridors seemed narrower, the stairs sharper. Children who had laughed together in the stairwell a few days earlier now crossed the hall to avoid Lucas, whispering behind cupped hands. Lucas caught May's sleeve one afternoon after school, eyes anxious. "Mom, why don't they want to play with me?" May blinked back frustration and knelt. "Sometimes people just need time. It's not your fault, sweetheart." But she knew something had shifted. One rainy evening, as May climbed the creaking stairs with grocery bags, she overheard two men and Pamela talking in low, urgent tones near the mailboxes. Their words floated up the stairwell. "I heard the last tenant in 23B had a breakdown. Police were here, right?" "She's always up late, you know, walking around. It's not normal." "Maybe it's a cultural thing," Pamela chimed in, her voice laced with measured and every silence a judgment. She would have to be cautious, she would have to be stronger than gossip, but for Lucas, always for Lucas, she would endure. Wounds and silence. For days, the walls of 23B seemed to press closer, the faded floral wallpaper pale in the evening shadows. May moved quietly, from kettle to sink, from laundry basket to bookshelf, her movements careful, almost apologetic. Each footstep felt too loud, each dropped spoon a thunderclap. Outside, the murmur of the building flowed around her like water evading a stone. Lucas grew quieter too. He often sat at the kitchen table, tracing circles on his science notebook while the television murmured in the background. May sensed his questions piling up behind his lips, but he didn't push. He was old enough to recognize the hush after every time the doorbell rang, or how he was the only child on the floor without weekend playdates. Then came Friday. The phone rang after school, Pamela's clipped voice on the line. "There's an issue, May. I think you should come down." When May arrived at the lobby's community room, she found Lucas standing by the window, his head lowered and his jacket smeared with dirt. Two mothers, Mrs. Alvarez and another from the fourth floor, stood across the room, arms folded. Pamela presided from a high-backed chair like a judge at tribunal. "Apparently," Pamela began, her voice syrupy but cold, "there was an altercation on the playground. Some of the children have said Lucas started it." May hesitated, looking at her son. "Lucas?" Lucas only shook his head, his eyes brimming with confusion and hurt. Mrs. Alvarez cut in, indignant. "My Benny says he pushed him and doesn't follow the rules. Maybe he doesn't understand." "It's not fair, Mom," Lucas spat out, but his voice cracked. and he blinked away tears. The mothers exchanged glances. Pamela's lips tightened. You see, it's important for all our children to feel safe. It's unfortunate, but perhaps Lucas can play somewhere quieter. For now. May felt the words cut like glass. We'll talk at home, she said gently, holding Lucas's hand and steering him away. In the elevator, the quiet pressed on all sides. May wanted to demand answers. Who had really started it? What exactly? For the first time, how silence can fill a home, echoing much longer than anger. But in the hush, something else grew, a determination, small but fierce. For Lucas, May vowed, she would not give in to their judgment, even when wounds went unseen, even when words failed. She promised herself she would not, could not, accept life as a ghost in her own home. The light opposite the window. The days blurred into one another, quiet and gray. But nights in apartment 23B took on a peculiar intensity. Confined within those four walls, May noticed everything. The tick of the old radiator, the elevator's sluggish groan, the way moonlight latticed across Lucas's sleeping face. But most of all, she noticed the flicker of light from the building opposite, the apartment whose windows faced theirs directly across a narrow alley. At first, she dismissed it as a neighbor's late-night television or a reading lamp left burning too long. But as autumn's early dusk settled over the city, May began to sense a pattern. Every night, well after midnight, the soft square of light flared to life on the 5th floor across the way. Sometimes it glowed steady until the sky bruised pink with dawn. Sometimes it blinked out after an hour. Once, she saw a silhouette pace restlessly back and forth in front of the window, tall, rigid, sometimes pausing as if listening for footsteps. One night, May stood at her own window, pretending to draw the blinds. Something in the light's rhythm unsettled her. It pulsed with purpose, not comfort. The rest of the neighborhood was asleep. Even the stray cat haunting the alley had curled up on the trash bins, but the opposite window burned on, a lone eye in the dark, watching, or perhaps sending a signal. Lucas shuffled into the room, rubbing his eyes. "Why are you up, Mom?" he mumbled. May gestured for silence, pulling him gently to her side. "Do you see that window over there?" she whispered. Lucas nodded, his face pressed to the glass. "They're always awake, too." A hush passed between them, the comforting sense of shared secrecy. Yet, as the minutes slipped by, May's certainty grew. There was something happening in that apartment, something that didn't belong to the simple routines of their building. It was as though the building itself composed. But a new possibility took root. Perhaps the rumors, the suspicion, the sense that she was being watched, perhaps it wasn't only about her. That afternoon, May reached for her old journal and began to scribble careful notes. Window facing west. Light on at 12:37 a.m. Silhouettes. 3 adults. Briefcase? What are they trading? She quietly resolved to watch and wait. If she was destined to exist in the background, anonymous and overlooked, then she would use that invisibility, not to hide, but to observe, to learn what lay beneath the surface of this fortress called home. And in the blue-shadowed hours between midnight and dawn, as the city hushed and the building held its breath, May studied the light across the alley, certain now that some secrets, once noticed, refused to fade. Shadows in the alley. It started as a restlessness May couldn't shake. The apartment felt smaller every week, the air inside thick and recycled, her unease circling like a moth around a bulb. The lure of answers tugged her toward the alley, toward those late-night secrets flickering in the window across from hers. Lucas was asleep when she first cracked the back door, careful not to wake him. The alley yawned below, slick with rain and puddled reflections of the city's neon haze. It was a place most tenants avoided, a shortcut for deliveries, a hiding place for stray cats, and the occasional orphaned shopping cart. May slipped outside, her sneakers silent against the gravel. She felt invisible, and for the first time, that invisibility gave her strength. She pressed herself into the shadow of a dumpster and waited. At first, there was only the hum of distant traffic and the drip of water down rusted pipes. Then a door creaked. Down the steps of the building opposite, 3 figures emerged, shrouded in hooded jackets, their voices a murmur beneath the hiss of rain. They paused at the end of the alley, one clutching that same briefcase May had watched trade hands through the glowing window. She strained the gloom. A stray orange tabby scattering cans. May flinched, then exhaled. Collecting herself, she studied the alley once more before retreating inside, the adrenaline lingering in her fingertips. That night, she double-checked every lock before crawling into bed beside Lucas. She hugged him to her chest, pressing her lips to his hair, feeling the vulnerability of their position. Old wounds of not being believed, of being blamed, pulsed in fresh bruises. For once, she wished desperately for someone to confide in, someone who would listen and understand. But the only answers she found stared back from the opposite window, burning with silent warnings. Sleep was slow in coming, troubled by fragmentary dreams of keys turning in locks, of voices whispering just outside her ear. In the whispering darkness, May resolved one thing. Next time, she would be less afraid. She would look closer. Shadows passed, but the truth remained, and she was determined to find it, no matter how deep she had to plunge into the city's hidden veins. Sleep came to May in short, anxious bursts, drifting past her mind like clouds that never quite rained. She spent the next day with a tightness in her chest, every conversation in the hallway colored by what she had glimpsed in the alley. When Lucas asked, over his morning oatmeal, why she looked so tired, May only smiled, promising, "It's nothing, sweetheart. Just grown-up worries." But the weight of the secret pressed on her all morning. She caught herself peering through the blinds, watching for any sign of the men or the mysterious briefcase. For the first time since moving in, her own reflection in the window seemed uncertain, haunted. By afternoon, Lucas sensed the change. He hovered close as she folded laundry, silent at her hip, until finally he asked, "Did someone say something bad about us again?" His voice was small, the kind of question that made May's heart ache. She knelt beside him. Careful. Lucas nodded, and in the brief silence their bond stitched itself tighter. 2 outsiders, clinging to each other in a building that watched but never embraced. Later that evening, as dusk melted into darkness, Lucas came to her with a flashlight and his old detective notebook. "We should write it down, keep track, like detectives do," he said, shy but determined. "If anything happens, we'll know what to tell someone." For the first time in days, May's burden felt lighter. Together, they made a list. Man with briefcase, Friday night. Light at midnight, opposite building. 3 figures, raincoats, whispers. Talked about too many eyes. They watched the window together that night, their breaths fogging the glass, the pages of the notebook blank but ready for whatever came next. For a few quiet hours, fear faded into curiosity, a new kind of hope. And though the shadows remained deep and the building pressed close, May no longer felt quite so alone. Sometimes, sharing a secret was the only way to keep it from swallowing you whole. Unwelcome visitors. 3 days passed, each one tight with unease. May went about her routines, boiling rice, folding laundry, helping Lucas with his spelling drills, but her senses thrummed with vigilance. The opposite window's midnight glow became their silent signal, as constant as the beating of her own heart. She and Lucas scribbled observations in the detective notebook, hands trembling with excitement, or maybe fear. On Tuesday evening, the routine cracked. After dinner, just as May cleared the table, a sharp knock echoed down the hallway, so abrupt it made Lucas drop his spoon. May's instinct was to ignore it, but Pamela's voice followed, smooth and unmistakable. "May, are you home? Open up, please." Resigned, May wiped her hands on her apron and unlocked the door. Pamela stood there, flanked by Mrs. Alvarez and, unsettlingly, a man she did not know. He was short and barrel-chested, with a mustache too sharp for his soft, searching eyes. He introduced himself as Mr. Cho, the building's acting security supervisor, newly appointed. Pamela's smile was thin, performative. "There's been some concern." Hallway. Mrs. Alvarez followed with a little humph. Lucas shrank against the wall, notebook clutched tight to his chest. "Is this your journal, Lucas?" Pamela inquired airily, reaching for it. May's hand shot forward. "It's just schoolwork." She offered a smile so forced it hurt her cheeks. Mr. Cho paced the living room, inspecting every corner as if their spare furniture and stacks of books might conceal a secret. He pressed at the window locks, scrutinized the fire escape. Pamela lifted the lid of their laundry basket with one manicured finger. When it was over, Pamela's mask cracked just enough to let a sliver of warning through. "These old buildings, they draw all sorts. It pays to be careful, May. Watch who's watching you." The whole procession retreated to the hallway, leaving a draft of judgment in their wake. Lucas's eyes shone with tears as the door clicked shut. May hugged him close, anger trembling in her limbs. "They can't just," Lucas whispered, trailing off. "They did," May said softly, drawing the curtains tight. "But if they're watching us, it means we're close. We just have to be smarter." That night, as the opposite window's light blinked to life, May felt the fear returning, but also something sharper. Not quite hope, not yet, but the sense that she and Lucas were no longer simply victims of rumor and shadow. They were in the middle of a story bigger than their own hearts, and this time, they would not be the ones left in silence. Echoes behind the walls. After the unwelcome intrusion, unease settled over the apartment like an unwanted guest who refused to leave. Lucas had the jitters, bolt upright in bed at the slightest sound. May's every movement was measured, curtains drawn tighter, locks checked twice before sleep. Even her heartbeat seemed to drum with suspicion. Yet the building itself was hardly silent. At first, it was just the ordinary symphony of city living, pipes clanging, elevators creaking, toddlers crying down the hall. But over the following nights, new sounds announced themselves, a muffled scrape, faint tapping behind the walls, and the subtle shuffle of cautious footsteps in the stairwell past midnight. One evening, when the city held its breath between rain showers, May sat at the kitchen table under the could no longer stand the tension. May handed Lucas a flashlight. "Let's follow the sound," she whispered, as if proposing mischief. Together, they crept into the hallway, shoes quiet on the scuffed linoleum. The building was a labyrinth at night, familiar yet foreign, every shadow stretching longer and every door looming. May led Lucas down 2 flights and along a back corridor rarely used except for trash day. Near the laundry room they paused. Here the echo of voices grew clearer, a hush of argument, the metallic scrape of something heavy dragged across tile. May's breath caught. She could make out Pamela's voice, shrill and insistent, and a man's calm, accented reply she didn't recognize. No one can know. If she talks, we have control. She's alone. No one listens to her anyway. The words made May's blood run cold. Lucas squeezed her hand, eyes huge in the glow of the flashlight. A door creaked and the voices faded. May ducked into a storage alcove, pressing Lucas to her chest as footsteps, calm, deliberate, passed within feet of them, only fading when the elevator doors clanged shut. Lucas was trembling, but there was a fire in his eyes. "They think we don't matter," he whispered. May kissed his forehead, her own fear burning now with something wilder, resolve. "We matter to each other, and we know the truth." They hurried back upstairs, careful not to draw attention. In their apartment, May pulled out her battered phone. There had to be someone who could help, someone who would finally listen, someone outside these walls thick with secrets and lies. As she drafted a message to a name she barely dared to trust, she caught sight of the window across the alley. The light was off for once, but May saw movement, a curtain shifting, a shadow pausing as if searching her own apartment for signs of life. The battle lines had grown clearer. The apartment, the alley, the twisting walls, they were all alive with echoes, heavy with history and danger. But May felt lighter, even in fright. With Lucas, with truth on their side, she would not fade into whispers. Not this time. Breaking the silence, May sat on the edge of her bed, phone clutched so tightly her and nobody seemed to care. But Tessa owed her nothing. Still, she typed, "I need your help. Something strange is happening in my building. Please call me back." She hesitated, thumb hovering, and then pressed send. May exhaled, her message winding its way into the city's sleepless circuitry, unsure if anyone on the other end would listen. Minutes bled into an hour. May moved to the living room, notebook spread before her, eyes flicking between scribbled observations and the dim outline of the window across the alley. She caught another flicker. A figure in the room opposite, pacing, pausing, peering as if searching the darkness for allies or adversaries. Her phone buzzed, startling her. May snatched it up. Tessa's name flashed on the screen. She answered in a hissed whisper, retreating to the bathroom for privacy. "Tessa? Thank you for calling back." "What's going on, May? You sound scared." May swallowed. "People here aren't what they seem. There's something happening. At night. In the alley. In the laundry room. I heard them say I was being watched because I know too much. My son and we're not safe here." A silence stretched, heavy and uncertain. Then Tessa's voice softened. "May, listen to me. If you're in trouble, you need to call the police." May's frustration flared. "I tried. Nobody listens. They think I'm just—" She broke off, her throat tight. "Will you come? Just— anyone else in the world believing me will make it real." "I'll be there in the morning," Tessa promised. "Don't open the door for anyone tonight, okay? Not even if it's the building staff. Especially not them." May nodded, tears springing to her eyes. "Thank you." Her voice caught. "I didn't know who else to." "You did the right thing," Tessa assured her and hung up. When May emerged, she found Lucas standing in the hall, blanket wrapped around him like a shield, wide-eyed and silent. He ran to her, burying his face in her side. "I heard you talking. Are we leaving?" he whispered. "Not yet." May promised. Head rested on her lap, one hand still clutching his detective notebook. His breathing soft and steady. A fragile comfort. Just after sunrise, 3 quick knocks broke the hush. May stiffened. heart rattling as fear and hope tangled inside her. Lucas woke with a jolt, blinking hard. Quietly, May moved to the peephole. Tessa stood outside, her familiar figure hunched against the chill in a faded denim jacket, clutching a canvas tote to her chest. She was older than May remembered, cheeks hollowed by life, but her eyes were as watchful and kind as ever. "It's okay," May whispered to Lucas and unlatched the door. Tessa stepped inside, pulling May into a fierce, silent hug. Over her shoulder, Tessa whispered, "You did the right thing calling me." May clung to her a moment longer, suddenly aware of how much she'd needed the warmth of a friend. Lucas lurked behind the door, peeking out with wary curiosity. Tessa knelt to his height, offering a cautious smile. "You must be Lucas. I hear you're the best detective in the building." Lucas managed a shy, proud nod, casting a glance at his mother for reassurance. They settled at the kitchen table, the three of them ringed by stacks of laundry, notebooks, the dull glow of the city beyond the window. May told Tessa everything: the briefcase, the whispers in the hall, the confrontation with Pamela and Mr. Cho. Lucas added his own observations, brandishing the notebook like evidence in a trail. Tessa listened, eyes sharp, never once interrupting. When they finished, she set her hands on the table, her jaw tight. "May, do you have your phone? I want you to write down everything you hear, everything you see, and send a photo to me. I'll do the same." She looked at Lucas. "You're the assistant detective, right? I'm going to need help keeping your mom brave." Lucas's chest puffed with a seriousness well beyond his years. "We can't." Mysterious watcher had always stood. "They're trying to hide now," he said, almost triumphant. May looked from Lucas to Tessa and out to the city waking under a bruised sky. For the first time in weeks, the dangers seemed less enormous, less insurmountable. She felt the embers of herself reignite, stubborn and bright. Sometimes, the only difference between prey and survivor is who shows up at your door in the morning. The morning wore on, slow and tense, like the hush before a storm. Though Tessa's arrival had brought a fragile sense of relief, the questions felt heavier now, sharper, more urgent. May busied herself in the kitchen, hands trembling as she rinsed rice, while Lucas and Tessa hunched over the notebook, whispering about the case. Tessa, true to her promise, worked methodically. She scrolled through her phone, tapping in notes and snapping covert photos of names posted next to apartment mail slots. "Old buildings have old stories," she whispered to May when Lucas was out of earshot. "But some names, they show up where they don't belong. Give me a few hours. I'll see what I can find." Lucas, emboldened by Tessa's belief in him, moved through the apartment like a junior detective. He drew floor plans, marking rooms where the light flickered at odd times. Every so often, he'd pause at the window, trying to catch a glimpse of the mysterious figure behind the blinds across the alley. Now, it seemed, they watched each other openly, a silent duel, both sides unwilling to blink. By noon, the building had settled into its daily rhythm, but the air was different. May could sense it, the feeling that she and her little circle were being weighed, measured, perhaps even hunted by invisible eyes. Conversations outside their door dropped to urgent whispers. The mailman hesitated at their box. Somewhere above, footsteps echoed in repetitive loops, as if someone were pacing or keeping watch. Tessa received a text and grew suddenly still, eyes glued to the screen. May wiped her hands on a towel, trying not to look panicked. The door, every suspicious glance from the hallway. Lucas practiced reciting what he saw and heard, ready to tell any grown-up who'd listen, police, reporters, anyone. Tessa called her journalist friend, leaving a message full of half-coded urgency. As afternoon clouds gathered, the air itself seemed to vibrate with tension. May checked her phone obsessively. No response from the police, no answer yet from the news station. Then, as the clock ticked toward evening, someone slipped an envelope beneath their door, a blank white square, unmarked. May opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single typed line. "Mind your own business, or you'll be next." Lucas's eyes widened, Tessa's mouth set into a razor-thin line. "No more hiding," Tessa whispered. "We're going to blow this wide open." May looked at her son, afraid, yes, but standing tall beside the friends he'd found. She realized, in that charged moment, that even threads meant to bind in silence can be unraveled if you pull together.